Hello, everyone. Today, we will dive into a mysterious and heartbreaking case involving a little girl who vanished from her bedroom in the middle of the night. What initially seemed like a straightforward investigation unraveled into shocking revelations that left everyone stunned. This is the story of Rowan Ford, a 9-year-old girl, and the investigative journey that uncovered an unimaginable truth. Stay tuned until the end of the video to uncover the full story behind this chilling case. Rowan Ford was born on April 11, 1998, in San Diego, California. After her parents divorced, her mother, Colleen, moved to a small town called Stella in Missouri. Colleen remarried David, a farmer. Rowan lived with her mother, stepfather, and several siblings in a large family. Rowan was an independent child who loved swimming, painting, and often helped younger children at the local church. However, her life wasn't easy. Her mother worked night shifts, and her stepfather was frequently absent, leaving her home alone quite often. On November 2, 2007, like any other day, Rowan's mother, Colleen, went to work a night shift at a local store. Rowan stayed home alone, while her stepfather, David, had yet to return from the farm where he worked. In a small, peaceful town like Stella, this wasn't unusual. However, the next morning, when Colleen returned home around 9 a.m., she realized that Rowan was no longer in her bedroom. Initially, she asked David about her daughter, and he claimed that Rowan had asked to spend the night at a friend's house, and he had agreed without asking for further details. This explanation unsettled Colleen. How could a 9-year-old leave home in the middle of the night on her own? And why didn't David ask for more information about Rowan's friend? Unable to shake her worries, Colleen began searching for Rowan around the neighborhood. Stella was a tiny town with a population of about 150 people, so checking her friends' houses didn't take long. Unfortunately, none of Rowan's friends had seen or heard from her that night. Colleen's unease turned into panic. After searching everywhere without success, she returned home and urged David to call the police. However, David reassured her, saying Rowan would likely return soon. Unable to wait any longer, Colleen herself called 911 that afternoon. The police immediately launched an investigation. David, Rowan's stepfather, became a key focus of their inquiries as he was the last person to see her before she disappeared. According to David, after returning home from the farm, he met up with two friends, Christopher and Nathan. The three of them drank and played pool at Christopher's house. Later that night, Nathan gave David a ride home. Upon returning, Rowan supposedly asked for permission to stay at a friend's house, and he allowed her to go without asking for details. However, this story raised suspicions among the police. How could a stepfather allow a 9-year-old girl to leave home in the middle of the night without knowing where she was going or who she was with, even in a peaceful small town? Such behavior was deeply questionable, with inconsistencies in David's statements and Rowan's unusual disappearance. The search effort quickly expanded. Volunteers from across the town joined forces, combing through every corner of Stella, from narrow paths and forests to abandoned buildings. However, that fateful night marked not only the beginning of a search, but also the unraveling of a series of horrifying events no one could have anticipated. Adding to the tension, when the police interviewed all of Rowan's friends, they confirmed that none of them had seen her that night. This only heightened the concern. David's statements started to show more discrepancies. He changed details about his timeline and actions, even suggesting at one point that Rowan might have left the house on her own without asking for permission. The police decided to question David's two friends, Christopher and Nathan, to verify his story. Both confirmed that they had been drinking with David at Christopher's house and that Nathan had driven him home. Yet their accounts provided no clarity about what happened to Rowan afterward. As David's story grew increasingly inconsistent, suspicion began to focus on him. Police started questioning whether he might be hiding something. Factors like his failure to inquire about which friend Rowan was staying with, allowing her to leave the house in the middle of the night, and his shifting statements put David at the center of the investigation. Meanwhile, the small town of Stella, with a population of only about 150, was gripped by panic. This was a peaceful place where children often played freely outside without worry. But Rowan's mysterious disappearance shattered that sense of safety. Local residents, fearing for their own children, joined in the search, but no trace of Rowan was found. The police widened the search area and enlisted the help of the FBI. The contradictions in David's testimony and the eerie circumstances surrounding Rowan's disappearance led investigators to believe this was no ordinary missing persons case. And the suspicion surrounding Rowan's stepfather was just the beginning of a shocking chain of events. The search for Rowan Ford quickly became the focal point of the entire town of Stella. With such a small population, everyone knew Rowan and her family. Residents and police scoured the area, from trails and woods to abandoned structures. But despite their best efforts, no trace of Rowan was found in the early days of the investigation. On November 4th, police extended their search to nearby areas and continued questioning David's two friends, Christopher and Nathan. Both reaffirmed that they had spent the evening drinking and playing pool with David before Nathan drove him home. While their stories seemed consistent, investigators sensed that something crucial was being left unsaid. On November 5th, the FBI officially joined the investigation. They broadened the search beyond Stella and began focusing on the possibility of Rowan being abducted. Special agents also turned their attention to David, whose statements continued to change. David started offering conflicting details, such as whether Rowan had asked for permission to leave and the exact time he returned home. Even more suspicious, the FBI discovered that David had borrowed his mother's car on the night of Rowan's disappearance, a detail he initially failed to disclose. Despite searching both his car and truck, investigators found no concrete evidence. Meanwhile, Christopher, one of David's friends, began exhibiting strange behavior. During another round of questioning, he stuck to his original story, but his demeanor raised doubts among investigators. They suspected he might be hiding something. On November 7th, Christopher unexpectedly requested a private meeting with Sheriff Clark, whom he had long trusted. In an emotional conversation, Christopher appeared on the verge of revealing something critical but ultimately held back. This led police to believe that Christopher was concealing a significant secret related to Rowan's disappearance. Everything changed on November 9th, exactly 1 week after Rowan went missing. A search team made a grim discovery. Rowan's body was found in a large hole in a remote area about 10 miles from Stella. Rowan's remains were concealed beneath layers of leaves and debris. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled to death. The horrifying scene left the search team in shock and grief. The investigation immediately shifted from a missing person case to a murder inquiry. The discovery of Rowan's body devastated her family and community, while intensifying pressure on the investigators. Who could commit such a monstrous crime? And why would an innocent child like Rowan become the target of such brutality? Police and the FBI zeroed in on Christopher and David, the two individuals most closely connected to the case. Their inconsistent statements and proximity to the events of that night made them primary suspects. What unfolded next would not only confirm the investigators' suspicions, but also reveal shocking truths that no one could have anticipated. Christopher began showing unusual behavior after hearing the news that Rowan's body had been found. He went to Sheriff Clark, someone he had trusted for a long time, to talk. Christopher requested to speak in a quieter place, and they went together to a small bridge outside town. There, Christopher unexpectedly told Clark, "Handcuff me. After what I am about to say, you'll have to do that." Clark remained calm and asked him to tell the whole truth. What Christopher confessed next shocked both Clark and the entire community. Christopher admitted that on the night Rowan went missing, he had intended to assault her. He knew David and Nathan would take a detour to avoid the police, so he drove straight to David's house, where Rowan was sleeping. Christopher sneaked into her room, carried her to the car, and took her to his home without waking her up. At his house, Christopher sexually assaulted Rowan. When she woke up and realized what was happening, she tried to fight back, fearing that Rowan would recognize him and tell others. Christopher decided to strangle her to cover his tracks. After killing Rowan, Christopher drove to a remote area near Powelltown. He buried her body in a large pit, using leaves and debris to cover it. He also confessed that he burned the clothes and the rope used to kill Rowan in a barrel at his house to destroy all evidence. Sheriff Clark could not believe that a man he had known for over 20 years could commit such a brutal crime. After finishing his confession, Christopher voluntarily went to the police station and repeated his statement to FBI agents. He was immediately arrested and charged with kidnapping, sexual assault, and the murder of Rowan Ford. When the police announced that Christopher had confessed to the crime, Rowan's stepfather, David, was also called in for questioning. This time, David provided a completely new statement, which made the case even more complicated. David claimed that on the night Rowan went missing, after returning home and not finding her, he suspected that Christopher was involved. He drove to Christopher's house and caught him in the act of sexually assaulting Rowan. But instead of saving her, David admitted that he had participated in the assault. Afterward, he and Christopher decided to kill Rowan to cover their tracks and bury her body in a large pit near Powelltown. However, when informed about David's statement, Christopher completely denied it. He insisted that he acted alone and that David was not involved. The contradiction in their statements put the investigators in a difficult position. Although David's testimony raised doubts about his involvement in the crime, the investigators found no physical evidence to charge him with murder, such as DNA traces or evidence at the scene. Ultimately, to avoid complicating the prosecution of Christopher, the prosecutors decided not to charge David with murder. With insufficient evidence to convict David of directly causing Rowan's death, he was only charged with 2 lesser offenses: obstructing an investigation and endangering a child. David was sentenced to 11 years in prison, with a minimum of 5 years to be served. This sentence immediately sparked outrage in the community. Many believed that David was also involved in Rowan's death and that the sentence was not fitting for the severity of the case. Meanwhile, Christopher was charged with kidnapping, sexual assault, and the murder of Rowan Ford. He was sentenced to death, and while this is the highest possible sentence, its execution could take decades. During the waiting period, Christopher will spend the rest of his life in prison, facing the crimes he committed. Despite Christopher's death sentence, the sentence for David left Rowan's family and the people of Stella feeling disappointed. They believed the justice system had not truly delivered justice for Rowan. Questions about David's level of involvement in the case remained unanswered, and with such a light sentence, he might never be held fully accountable for what happened. With Christopher's confession and David's light sentence, the Rowan Ford case was officially closed. But the pain and anger lingered in the Stella community. Many people felt that David's 11-year prison sentence was far too light given his role in the incident, especially since he did not protect Rowan and had been involved in concealing evidence throughout the investigation. Although David insisted he only covered up Christopher's crimes and did not participate in the murder, many remained skeptical. Investigators could not find physical evidence strong enough to charge him. But this did not reduce the disappointment felt by Rowan's family and local residents. Christopher was sentenced to death, and while the sentence was believed to be fitting for his crimes, the process of carrying out the death penalty often takes decades. This caused concern that Christopher might spend longer in prison than necessary, rather than facing the consequences of his actions. The case of Rowan Ford not only left an indelible wound in her family's heart, but also became a valuable lesson for the justice system. Many organizations called for reforms to close legal loopholes, ensuring that sexual offenders and those at high risk would no longer have the opportunity to cause harm. Rowan's loss reminds everyone that children must always be protected, not just from strangers, but sometimes even from those closest to them. Rowan's family has advocated for increased public awareness, especially regarding the responsibilities of parents. Rowan Ford was a lovely girl with a bright future ahead, but her life was taken away by unforgivable, cruel actions. While justice has been served to some extent, the pain left by this case will forever be a profound reminder of all our responsibility to protect children. This story also highlights a painful truth. Sometimes the justice system is not strong enough to protect the most vulnerable, but that doesn't mean we can't take action. Let's do more to protect the children around us, so tragedies like Rowan's case never happen again. What do you think about this case? Was justice served appropriately? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to help spread meaningful and important stories like this. Thank you for watching today's video. See you in the next story.